The first life-saving effort in Massachusetts was done by the Humane Society of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and they formed in 1785. 1785, the Humane Society was organized by very wealthy Boston businessmen. They all got together at a restaurant in Boston, and they were all talking, what can we do to reduce the loss of life from shipwrecks? Because what was happening in those days, oftentimes shipwrecks would happen in the middle of the winter when there's nobody around to save the crew if they came up onto a beach. And there's nobody near the beaches in those days. So the first thing that they decided to do was to build what they called huts of refuge. And here's a photograph of one taken years and years and years ago. They were very simple buildings. They had a stove and firewood and blankets. And crews of ships would kind of know the locations of these huts of refuge. So if you came ashore, for example, on the Forest Queen, you would then have in the back of your mind, okay, there's a hut of refuge a mile and a half down the beach. We've got to get there and get the fire started and try to warm ourselves up. Eventually somebody would come along and give them more assistance. The Humane Society kept doing this and expanding that kind of work throughout the 1800s. A chart of the coast showing the locations of the life-saving stations at some point in the mid-1800s. And every place you see a plus, there are these stations. For Scituate, there was one in the Glades, North Scituate, Scituate Harbor, Bassing's Cove near the second cliff, and one at the third cliff. If you look, there's a whole cluster of them here in Scituate because there were so many shipwrecks taken. Not only were they just building huts of refuge, they started developing better equipment that would allow them to even figure out a way of getting a piece of equipment out to the ship and pull the crew safely to shore. It's called the breeches buoy. The Humane Society developed this before the federal government. And the idea was that you would shoot a line out to a ship. The crew would grab the line, and the idea would be to fire that line and have it snag up high at a mast. Then attached to that very lightweight line would be a heavier line, and attached to that would be a heavier line, until you got a line on board that could hold a whole human. They've rigged the whole thing up, and now they're beginning to pull the crewmen from the ship to the shore. And here's the breeches buoy right here. It was a big ring with canvas pants sewn onto the bottom of it. The pants would keep you stable, and they would drag you from the ship to the shore. Hopefully they got you so high up under the mast that the angle would be such that you wouldn't be drawn through the surf. But that sometimes had to happen. They dragged through the water. That was not the ideal way to do it. This is a picture of an actual crewman right here being pulled off a ship that came ashore at Sand Hills Beach. The name of the ship was the Nantasket. It's carrying lumber. Came ashore in December 1909, and the Humane Society rescued most of the crew before the United States Life-Saving Service arrived on the scene. The Humane Society was doing their operations starting in the late 1700s. Politically, around 1865 to 1870, people in other states started putting pressure on the federal government. They were saying, hey, why is it up in Massachusetts the Humane Society is so successful in rescuing crew and the federal government is doing nothing in other states? The pressure on Congress became so great that in 1871, Congress appropriated money to establish the United States Life-Saving Service. So then they started building stations. And then in this state, for quite a long time, the Humane Society and the United States Life-Saving Service were in competition, friendly competition. Eventually, the United States Life-Saving Service name was changed to, guess what? the United States Coast Guard. This is a model of a beach cart. Now, the beach cart for a life-saving station was the most important piece of equipment that you would have. On the beach cart would be located everything you needed to set up the breaches buoy. Whether you were at a Humane Society station or the United States Life-Saving Service, they both had these. They would be equivalent to a fire truck in a fire station today. If you didn't have that piece of equipment, you're going to accomplish really nothing.